As we announced earlier, tonight we are going to be receiving the president of the Aya Foundation and the spokesperson of the Aya family, Mr. Aya Abine. Good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Talking Point.
Thank you, Sister Mimi. Thanks for having me.
In the course of this newscast, we have talked about the senatorial election results that were finally proclaimed today in the nation's capital, Yaoundé, by the Constitutional Council that was put in place barely a few weeks ago in the month of February 2018. Now, we are going to be having a different political configuration in Cameroon Senate for the first time after the election results were proclaimed. Only two political parties are at the Senate as at now, because the President of the Republic still has to appoint 30 more senators, and the Social Democratic Front has lost 7 seats in the upper house of Parliament. What is your reaction?
I belong to the school of thought that believes that we don't need a Senate. It's a waste of money and resources. That money can be used in building reference hospitals in all subdivisions, or just a tenth of that money can be used in helping Cameroonian refugees that are in Nigeria get some relief, or just about a quarter of that amount of money used in running the Senate yearly can be used in rebuilding the houses of citizens that have been burned in villages like Didi, Kwakwa, even as recently as yesterday, Konye, Kembong, you have all this. So the Senate to me is a waste of resources. It's true that on paper you need those institutions, just on paper, because everything in Cameroon is on paper.
You are an actor of the civil society, and the role of the Senate in a country like Cameroon cannot be undermined.
It has no role.
What makes you think that the Senate is not as vital as you are saying?
It has no role at all. The Parliament is made up of 2 houses of assembly, the National Assembly and Senate. It's the National Assembly that makes the law. They send it to the Senate for proofreading. The Senate sends it back to the Assembly. It's the Assembly that makes law. Nothing has changed in the lives of Cameroonians since we had the Senate. Nothing at all. No, maybe something has changed. We've had more money allocated to that house of retirees, as we can call it that way. Money which could be pumped into the private sector, or as I said earlier, into rebuilding the houses of citizens in lots of areas in the north and southwest regions that have been burnt down. I believe, as I've always said, we have 3 arms of government on paper. It's just on paper. But in practice, we have 1 arm of government. We have the executive, we have the executive legislature, and we have the executive judiciary. The executive does everything. In Parliament, for example, as I mentioned, the National Assembly, all the bills come from the executive. And when those bills are in Parliament, at times, not even a T is cut or an I is dotted. The bills just go in and have their way. We don't need a Senate. The Senate is a waste of resources.
From your declarations, the outgoing Senate has not been able to live up to expectations of you and many Cameroonians that have been complaining. What were you expecting from the senators that were there for 5 years that has made you say that the institution is not worthy to be in place in the first place?
I expected nothing from the Senate because, as I've said earlier, it has no role to play. The only thing the Senate does is to read and proofread the bills that are voted, enacted, if I can put it that way, the bills that go through Parliament. So Parliament does the work, the National Assembly, the lower house does the work and sends it to the Senate, and the Senate just reads. And if there's anything to be adjusted, the Senate does nothing, no adjustment. They send it back to Parliament. The Senate is just like, if I can call it that way, maybe an English language teacher that just reads the things that have been done by the National Assembly and says, okay, I think what you people have done is good. I just propose that you add 1 or 2 or this. And even if the National Assembly doesn't do that, the Senate has no.
But Mr. Aya, the Senate is there and Cameroonians have to deal with it. Now we have the situation now in the upper house of Parliament, just with 2 political parties, looking at the importance of the upper house of Parliament, especially when it has to do with political transition in Cameroon. We see just the Social Democratic Front and the governing CPDM. What does it tell us?
The same story we've had, I think, 3 decades, complementing themselves. Little or nothing to the lives of Cameroonians, little or nothing at all in the lives of Cameroonians. Let's take an example. The Anglophone crisis affecting the lives of Cameroonian citizens. Their nationality has not changed until the contrary is proven. It is barred from being talked about in the Senate, and the National Assembly. So even those two houses, but let's just deal with the National Assembly. The Senate has no role. It's a waste of resources. We do not need it. But since it's already there, let's just accompany them as they spend our hard-earned taxpayers' money to enjoy themselves. They have nothing to do.
And now that you are talking about the Anglophone crisis, yesterday we saw the images of some alleged kidnappees that have been released by the government of Cameroon. According to the communication minister, Issa Shirma Bakari, they were kidnapped by what he described as terrorists. But we're having conflicting reports from some international media organs, like the Reuters. Even Anglophone activists are saying that they are not behind the kidnapping. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think when there are conflicting declarations, we go by the declaration of the victims. The victims, from what I've read, except I'm wrong, from Reuters and all those, they are saying they were not kidnapped by anybody. That's what the victims are saying. The government is giving another version. If we are, for example, in court, the judges, we are jurists, we like the law, the judges will go by the declaration of the victims and not by third-party declarations. So I would prefer the declaration of the victims that they were not kidnapped unless those international organizations like Reuters and the rest are telling a lie. But if they were telling a lie, the victims would have showed up and said, no, Reuters, you're telling a lie. So I go by the declaration of the victims. They were not kidnapped.
Do you think
whatever.
that the government is trying to paint Anglophone activists black in front of the national and the international community? Is that the objective here?
I believe it should fall among their objectives, one of their objectives. For example, you see, we have to get a number of deviation tactics. The most deviation tactics we can get, the better for us. So this would be maybe some way to escape from the fact that we have over 50,000 nationals in Nigeria prostituting, sleeping on the streets, begging, and fighting to survive. And the government has made no statement of its citizens that are dying in Nigeria. So we need these kind of things to divert from the truth that is staring us in the naked eye. So we need this kind of diversions. We don't need this kind of diversions. If there are declarations to be made, those declarations should be about the victims of the crisis. And up to this point, the government has been very irresponsible in that regard.
Talking about irresponsibility on the part of the government, we have been seeing meetings of some government officials. The Minister of Territorial Administration visited the two Anglophone regions. In the course of this newscast, we saw the report of Babla Jonathan talking about the senior divisional officer for Meme Division that was calling on chiefs to play their role and ensure that those that have escaped into bushes return to their respective localities. Do you think it's reassuring for Anglophone Cameroonians that are now seeking refuge in Nigeria, like you say, others in bushes and others in other parts of the country?
What he was doing is showbiz. Maybe there was some, I don't know, maybe he had some benefits, financial benefits from doing it, but that is showbiz. It's very far from what we expect. But what can he even do? There is nothing he can do at the moment where the government is not helping the situation. Let me say it this way. This is how we are solving the Anglophone crisis. In the morning, we are preaching dialogue, inclusive dialogue. They are the people using those terms, not me. We are preaching inclusive dialogue in the morning. And just after saying inclusive dialogue, we go trying to shoot our way through the crisis, burning down houses. And at a certain point, we say, though we are talking inclusive dialogue, our definition of the word inclusive is different from what the dictionaries have of inclusive. We will talk only with some people. We call them the moderates. You have Fontem, Bala, Ayapo, Tumi, Wiba, all of them falling into that category. Now, this is the problem. I am talking to the moderates, they are watching. There is no moderate in Cameroon, on the ground as they call it, that has a control of the situation. No moderate. They have lost it all. They have no voice. No voice at all.
So who has the voice now?
The radicals have taken out of the show. The problem a lot in this country is that we don't speak the truth. Every society that wants to grow must grow in truth and justice. Those are the things we should be preaching. Truth and justice. Because when you have truth and justice, you have peace. When we go by preaching peace and all those other slogans, it's like hiding injustice and untruth. Let's preach truth and justice. The truth is, neither Bella, Fontem, Tumi, Weber, Ayapol, and the rest has a control of the situation on the ground.
Ayapol is your father.
Exactly.
So curious.
Exactly. He has no control of the situation on the ground. Saying the contrary would imply that these 5 people are the people sending people to kill security forces, which is the order of the day now. I was to go, for example, to Bello today, and I was called by people there and they told me, don't come, there is
It was a very chaotic atmosphere.
It would imply that is these 5 people that are providing arms, as we have heard, to people on the ground. No. It would imply that it's these 5 people that are telling people, keep your kids away from school and just maintain the status quo as it is until such a time that the government wants to speak. It is not these 5 people. Let them be honest to themselves. They have no control of the situation on the ground. So when you're preaching dialogue and you don't want it to be inclusive, how do you go about this? There must be a way. You would have to call these radicals and say, hey guys, please, let us give dialogue a chance. It's only at that point that you will involve the moderates. Involving the moderates now, you saw what they did to Frundi. They came after him. Even when the crisis started, they told him, sir, go home, we don't need you here. Bala, they came after him. Fountain, they told him, just keep quiet. That's why he's very quiet, he has nothing to say. Ayapol said, oh man, just go home. We understand what you have gone through. We don't want to rough handle you. They don't have a control of the situation. So we preach inclusive dialogue in the morning and we practice the contrary. During the day, we take peace plans and parade the streets of the north and southwest region, which is a very good thing. We need peace. The contrary situation is dramatic. Citizens held those peace plans on the 22nd and the 1st last year, and they were shot and killed. And we hold those peace plans in areas that are relatively very quiet, Boya and Bamenda, they have little or no issues. Rather than taking those peace plans to the war zones where the military is burning houses, the military is supposed to protect its citizens. The military is burning houses. Take those peace plans to Kwakwa, to Didi, to Kembon, to the refugees.
But the government officials will tell you that the Anglophone activists are carrying out the burnings in the northwest and the southwest regions of Cameroon.
Unimpeachable sources, including me, who has been on the ground, I'll say the contrary. Unless you want to tell me the Cardinal, one of the most respected Anglophones living, is a liar. He went to his village and he saw the same thing, and he had eyewitnesses. I have been to Kembon, I've been to Didi, I've been to Konya, I've been to Kwakwa. If it weren't the military, our troops, then citizens will be running to the military in times of chaos and not for safety, and not running away from the military. That's what we did when we were young. When we had issues, we called the military, we ran to the commissariats. What is happening now? We see the military and we run away. There's a problem. I can tell you authoritatively that even me, when I see the military coming in the south and northwest regions, I change course. How on earth will we rebuild the confidence between the population and the military ever again? How will we do that? And the third point, as I was talking, we stop those who want to help refugees, our citizens in another country, from helping them. We stop them. We are doing nothing about it. We are not talking about it. We don't want anybody to talk about it. And those who are helping us to do their job are stopped from doing that. It's abominable. Like
you were stopped in Ekok, that was just a few days ago. You were about traveling to Akwaya and then to the refugee camps.
Yeah, that is the greatest humanitarian abomination of all time. See, Mimi, even in war-torn Syria, for about a decade now and plus, humanitarian access is granted by both extremes to victims who are caught in the crossfire.
Do you think there's a particular reason as to why you have been prevented from crossing over to Nigeria?
Yes, there are several reasons. Number one, as I said earlier, the government has made no statement about its citizens that are dying and prostituting and begging in another man's land. There, I've been there. There, water is a luxury. Portable water. I don't want to go to food. Water is a luxury. Kids are dying. Grandparents are turning against your grandchildren and granddaughters for sachets of oil and cups of water. The government makes no statement about the citizens that are dying in another man's land. But we are helping Central African refugees up east, and we're making statements for the whole world to hear. So for the government,
even Nigerian refugees.
Even Nigerian refugees. So for the government, charity does not begin at home. Charity starts abroad and ends abroad. That's why they're stopping everybody who wants to help. Oh God, Mimi.
Mr. Aya Abine, is there a way out to the refugee crisis now in Nigeria, because it's getting more and more alarming. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees keeps telling us that the figures are swelling on a daily basis. We move from hundreds of thousands to tens of thousands as we speak.
And I can authoritatively tell you...
Is there a way out?
Yeah, there is a way out.
The refugee crisis.
I can authoritatively tell you. Yeah, I can authoritatively tell you, like somebody who's been there, that there are over 50,000 refugees in those areas. 4 states: Cross River State, Benue State, Taraba State, and Akwa Ibom State. There are patches in Lagos and Abuja, people who have just given up. They've just given up and are trying to find a way out. They are in patches in Akwa Ibom, Abuja, and even at Enugu. Government should send a delegation to Nigeria. The first question that was asked to me by the second in command of Cross River State was, "Are you a government official?" I said, "No." I was even ashamed by his questions. He had to even call Cameroon to verify who I was. I said, "No, I'm not a government official." "What's your government saying about this?" I just told him, "No, the government has an agenda. They're preparing." "They are preparing." I said, "Okay." The government sends a delegation to Nigeria to visit its citizens. You can't be talking of appeasement and dialogue on solving the agri-food crisis, and you're mentioning nothing about your citizens that are dying in another man's land. How can you be practicing? It's like those pastors we had of yesteryears that are saying, "Do what I say and not what I do." You're preaching A and you're practicing B. The government sends a delegation there, number one. Number two, those houses that have been burned, those people want to return. Where do they come to? Their houses have been burned. There is no gainsaying. We know who's burning the houses. Where do they come and live in? That's what I was talking of the Senate. If we cut off just a quarter of that budget that is used to run those luxury cars, those flamboyant salaries, we will rebuild those houses. We should rebuild those houses. We burn the houses. They come back and stay where? Number three, the Aya Foundation has started Come Back Home for refugees. We started bringing in some of the kids. The government should join us in that Come Back Home.
Is it an easy task for you as president of the Aya Foundation?
It is an enormous tax. It's very difficult.
Now that you are even being prevented or restricted from entering Nigeria.
And that's the shameful thing about it. If the government wants to solve the crisis, it starts with the refugees. It comes to the detainees. It comes to some sort of talk with the radicals. Let us speak the truth and shame the devil. We know those who are in control of the situation. They are on the internet. We know them. Find a way to tell Mark Barretta, Akosun Pauline, Tapang Ivo, the general as they call him, as Fronde calls him. Find a way to tell those people,
like you say.
The radicals. Find a way to tell those people, please let us give dialogue a chance. They are the people in control. The moderates on the ground have no control unless they are the people killing our troops, unless they are the people telling students not to go to school, unless they're the people telling the population to believe in the radicals.
Thank you so much, Mr. Aya Abine. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on Talking Point. We hope to have you some other time again.
You're a very beautiful woman.
Thank you so much. To our viewers, it was equally a pleasure for having you with us in this edition of the Primetime Newscast on EQUINOX Television. Wishing you a blessed stay in the company of our programs. Until we meet again, goodbye.